Hey everyone, I just wanted to jump on here really quickly and kind of walk through some steps that I took when looking at this. I think this was module 3, our last module. Um, the discussion that we had, which by the way, not many people answered, so I would like for y'all to be more involved in these class discussions because these are really the areas that I can tell that you're kind of getting it. You kind of understand what I'm talking about, or at least the process that we need to go through with some of these things, and not just memorizing or looking up answers in your book and just kind of sailing through this. The interaction is really the most important part in how to arrive at some of this knowledge and skills that you might need, even if it's not in this topic, going forward in your careers, how to solve problems, how to look outside the box sometimes. So, on this specific example, I wanted to walk through this with you just for a second, excuse me, about how I looked at it. Because, full disclosure, if you haven't been able to tell by now, I know a lot about our local geology and karst and all that. I don't know that much about coastal erosion, I'll be honest. It's not my specialty, and I've dealt with it a lot in my career. I understand the basics of it. I understand enough to teach this course, but when it comes to expertise, it's not my thing. So, since it's not my thing, I wanted to do something that I'm not just comfortable with, that's easy for me too, because I'm asking you all to do all this work and think about these things that maybe you don't know that much about. Why not? Why shouldn't I do that too? So that's why I chose this topic. And I'll be honest, I just started scanning the Pacific coast and found this area and thought it would be a good topic. I don't know anything about this. I've never been to this site. I've never seen this site before. I just found it by looking at this map. So it stood out to me because it's a pretty big inclusion into the coastline here, and it's pretty uniform as well. So why would that happen? Now, a couple of you did answer, and you had some good observations. You talked about coastal erosion, and that obviously wave action has something to do with this, and that's entirely correct. But as a scientist, you also want to look at, okay, why did it happen here? In other words, there's coastal erosion happening all the way up and down the coast, right? We can zoom out. All this is coastal erosion. Why is it happening in this particular spot? You see other spots, more beaches down here. You see cliffs here. You see some greenery here. That's going to be important. So I wanted to look at that a little bit closer. Now, obviously, as a scientist, it's always better to get boots on the ground, to be able to visit a site and look at it and look around and see your environment. That's always best case scenario. And in problems like that we're looking at right here, that may be what's needed to truly understand what's going on here. We might not be able to tell exactly what's happened just from a map. And that might be the case here. I might have some different observations if I were to get on the ground and actually look at this. But this is also why Google Earth is so useful as a tool that we can use to study these things. And I'm going to show you why. So just looking at this from above, obviously you have a lot of coastal erosion from waves happening all up and down this coast. But right here, we have a definite slump, which means this erosion has worked harder right in this area. For some reason, it was able to get past these initial cliffs and rode inland. And once it got inland, it started creating larger slumps. If you remember from your lesson, a slump is when the land just basically caves away and slips down the slope here. So as we go closer and we get kind of in 3D, you can see the actual erosion is happening down here. But as this material gets eroded away, the material behind it, if it's not like hard rock, because right here, this is pretty hard consolidated material. But once you get back in here, it seems to be the more sandy type soil, which it appears to be. Again, I haven't seen it or touched it. Is more easily erodible, and it's slumped down and inward toward the coast and toward the water. So we have slumping going on here. So why right here? What makes this different from anything else? If we zoom out, one thing that I see immediately that draws my attention as a scientist is I see a little sliver of green right here going all the way to the coast from these hills, small mountains. Really, it probably comes down from behind this small mountain or small hill range. I don't know what they call these. Here, this will probably be a mountain. Probably don't call it that there because they have much larger mountains. But you can see this water's running down here, and part of it looks like it runs over here. But there's some water getting over here and draining this way. Now, if I zoom into this over here, here's our feature. Look up here, you can obviously see that water has started to drain off here, and it's creating a gully, a ditch, whatever you want to call it. There's erosion happening here, falling straight down into the ocean. So what's going on here? So first of all, this is a smaller amount of water probably that's flowing from the backside of this and going straight into here. That looks like a little bit more significant valley right here. However, there's a small amount going here. One other thing I see is there is an impoundment here, a small dam. You see that straight line across this drain. You see water here. So that's a large pond or a dam. I don't know exactly how big that is. I can measure it real quick and tell you approximately. I'm not going to get right on it, but so we're looking about 3-acre pond right there. So you have a small body of water here, and humans have dammed this up. Okay, so we've got all that established, right? So then I started looking at this area right here because it looks kind of odd from up in space, up above it. And it was kind of hard to tell originally. You can see some relief distance here. Is this an impression? Is this the depression in the earth? Like a big sinkhole perhaps? Or is it a hill? It's kind of hard to tell from above, but when we zoom in and go down to ground level and start looking at this, first of all, you see a road here, pretty straight road right in front of this. So let's go down a little further till we get down to ground level. So now we're sitting in the bottom of this, and we can clearly see that this is a depression. So around here, your first thought would be a sinkhole, right? They don't have sinkholes in this area of California, so it's not a sinkhole. You can see it's really high. This is basically where that inclusion in the beach is, the erosion happening. We're looking at it right here. A little bit less elevation over here. As we turn around, we're in this basin, this low spot, and here is where that pond is, where that dam was built. So you have a small body of water behind this, and you have a depression here. So what likely happened here? So again, without having knowledge of this, without visiting this site, here's my thought on this. What most likely happened was, before this impoundment was made, you had a small drain, which you see right now is going over here, that was flowing from this wetter area. You see a major road here from these hills. It was flowing down through here and probably entered the ocean right in this area. It would have been out here on this cliff face. So what happened is that this was probably man-made right here, this higher area. It might not be totally man-made, but it's got to be somewhat man-made. Something had to be covered here to stop that flow of water from coming in right here. Most likely it came in right here because this is going to be your lowest spot all around this whole thing. So most likely it was flowing in through here somewhere and dropped in right over here. This has been built up. There's some kind of a structure right here. I'm guessing you see some ag going on out here, some type of agriculture. This is probably an office or a small trailer that somebody might live in. And then you see this depression. So what's this depression? My guess, and I'm probably pretty accurate on this, is this hole was dug to build this dam right here. So they dug out all this material and built this dam to make this pond. So they created a low spot, and in this low spot, you're still going to have some outflow from this small pond. So it's probably still flowing through here, probably right along here. And they probably channelized it right here. In other words, This is still higher than this depression, so there's probably some type of drain tile or small tunnel under this, and it is going under this small rise and it's flowing through this ditch, and now it's flowing out to the ocean right here instead of dropping off right here as it has been. So this diversion was probably intentionally done by people, and that's why you see the small amount of vegetation, because you do have a damp drenched ditch or channel right here, so it has had water to grow some vegetation, and now it's tumbling off this cliffside and down to the ocean. So you have some erosion going on here. You have your water impoundment. So my guess, and my educated guess, would be that this first started in this small drain, and it worked its way back. It probably got quite large while the water was still flowing into here. This is probably not a really, really recent phenomenon, but this slumping may have occurred more recently in human history. So we know what California was settled, 200 years ago, a little less than that. So within the last couple of hundred years, this slumping has probably gotten a lot worse. This much erosion probably hasn't happened within 200 years. However, it's probably gotten a lot worse on the interior part of this. So those are the types of things that I look at, and I did put a couple of superficial lines on here. They're not exact by any means, just kind of thinking out loud. So I'll go over here and put these on. So this is probably roughly how this water flows right now. Of course, it's stopping here, being impounded, and as it runs out of here, it runs through this little basin, probably through a pipe right through under this rise right here, and out into the Pacific Ocean. This is probably roughly where it ran originally. Now, this is not exact because I drew this from another angle looking back from this way, so it probably ran more from here down to this corner right here is more accurate. And then I also outlined the basin now. So this road right here is much higher than the bottom of this basin. So again, vegetation is able to grow where it's a little bit damper, there's a little bit more water available, but this entire basin was probably dug to build this dam right here. So this whole system has a lot to do with why we're seeing what we're seeing here. Now, some of you had some different ideas, and by the way, you see some very small drains. Even a very small drain is creating a pretty good erosional feature right here. So you can see how this would have been created or started from this larger drain, even this very small one right here, and we can zoom in a little bit more. This is just a little drainage ditch off these fields right here, and it's eroded a pretty good little gully down through there. We call it a gully here. I don't know what they call it out in California. But this is just one way. I wanted to walk through this with you. You see another drain kind of starting here and come down and join in this one most likely. I just wanted to walk through this with you just to show you how the process kind of works, how people like scientists start to arrive at conclusions. So the next step would be, if I really wanted to resolve this as a scientist, and this is not practical for our purposes, but if I was in California, I would visit this site. If this was something that we needed to fix for some reason, if it's something that the local community wanted to fix, we would actually look at this and get an idea, okay, this is what we think it might be, and then we could go to the site and study it further, do some surveying, get some elevation changes, look at if this is indeed a drain tile or a tunnel where the water's flowing through, and get some information that we could start to work at some conclusion on this. So a couple of you did mention seismic activity. Can't rule that out unless I get out there and look at it. And again, I'm not an expert in seismic activity either, but that certainly would be a consideration scientists would think about in something like this. Is there a fault line here? I don't know. I have no idea if there's a fault line right at this location, but in cases that could be what causes something like this. So again, I just wanted to walk you through this. There's no definite answer on this right now. I can't say 100% it happened just like this, but just from my remote observation on a map, that's the best scenario I could come up with. not really being an expert on coastal erosion or anything like that. So just kind of browse through this. Keep that in mind as we go through this. I might have some kind of exercises later on in the semester before we end the semester on this type of thought process. Thanks.